Why is it that my avoidant partner can spend consecutive days with their friends, but I can only get 1 day with them per week? Okay. So it can feel really confusing and even painful when you have a partner that seems completely capable of spending quality time multiple days a week with someone that is one of their friends, but then it seems like they intentionally restrict or limit their time with you to just 1 day a week, right? In this case. So it's important to understand that the emotional energy required in a romantic relationship, I'd say across the board, but particularly true for an avoidant partner, that energy is for them fundamentally different than from a friendship. That's why we call them intimate romantic relationships, because they come with an extra level of emotional closeness, vulnerability, right? And a mutual expectation of certain needs getting met that friendships do not. And so for avoidantly attached partners, friendships can feel recharging for them because it is a place where they can show up without the pressure of having to be emotionally contributory or responsible for someone else's feelings on that extra level of investment. And they don't have to work towards that deep, intimate level of attunement because it's not necessarily something that comes second nature to them. Now, in contrast, romantic relationships can sometimes feel draining for them, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the closeness kind of activates the internal narratives that they carry around connection. So, whatever their internal narratives are around relationships, right? The wounds that they carry, fears of failure, fears that you're expecting too much, or that you're demanding too much, or you want more than they have to give, like that sort of prevailing, pervasive narrative that they carry, unconscious fears that they're not going to be able to meet you where you're at or what you need, and they haven't really learned yet how to show up and regulate themselves well enough to be attuned to you so that it doesn't feel draining. So if they're only spending 1 day a week with you, that tells you something about their capacity already. Doesn't mean that they're not interested, willing, or wanting to expand, grow, or evolve that capacity or that relationship, but they are telling you something about where the capacity is right now. Okay. So there's a certain 1 day a week indicates a certain rhythm and pace and frequency with which they're going to be able to achieve that over time. And you're going to have to kind of come to your own conclusions about how comfortable you are with that. You know, how much does this person in this relationship meet the needs that you have in general around relationships, and how compatible is that in comparison to what they clearly need and want. So your desire to want to spend more time together is healthy and valid and normal, but your partner may unconsciously associate romantic closeness with some degree of pressure, a loss of their own independence, or a fear of failing to meet your needs, right? And those are the deeper attachment wounds going on and that are at play. And they're not necessarily your fault, but looking at and really naming the difference in how intimacy is experienced for you versus how it's experienced for them might open up the door in a conversation for understanding whether this is a connection that's really going to be able to meet you where you're at. Because he's given you a lot of good information. I mean, the other thing too is like a person has history with their friends, right? They know them. They've already done that work. If you're just starting to date someone and they're seeing you once a week, you haven't done that work yet, right? And sometimes, avoidant partners, they are slow to warm up. Whereas if you find yourself being of a more anxious disposition, they're very fast, right? So it can feel like rejection if you are somewhere on the extreme end of the anxious spectrum. But, slow to warm up exists on a spectrum of secure people can be slow to warm up all the way, over to avoidant people being slow to warm up. So it's really going to be a conversation between the two of you, and you're going to be very clear on what it is that you need and want. And you also got to be able to say, this is not for me. Right. So I hope that helps.